Au nom du Père et du Fils et du Saint-Esprit, la paix soit avec vous. Les prières et les lectures seront celles de la messe du bienheureux Basil Moreau, dont la fête sera célébrée chaque année le 20 janvier, jour de son entrée dans la vie éternelle.
I want to add a word of thanks to Monseigneur Ferret. Vraiment, nous avons reçu ici les paroles d'un grand pasteur, un bon pasteur. I said to His Excellency how grateful we are for his extraordinary kindness to us, to the family of Basil Moreau, during this visit that we have had. He has been present to us constantly, and we can see in him a very good shepherd and a great example of all that is good, all that is best in the Church of France. Aye. I would say more about him, but it's not his beatification, it's Moreau's, so I will leave it at that. But just to say how grateful I am to be able to be the celebrant here, and how grateful to the bishop for his great kindness, to all my brother bishops who are here, in a special way to Father General and to the Superiors General of the three congregations of great sisters. And I've had a chance in these last few days to feel very much at home with this congregation. I don't know how you apply to be an extra member along the way, but they probably don't take people after 77, but anyway, it is a joy to be with them and a joy to be with all of you. Chers frères et fils, préparons-nous maintenant à la célébration de l'Eucharistie en reconnaissant que nous sommes pécheurs.
Jésus, notre frère, venu partager notre vie, prends pitié de nous.
Amen.
Que Dieu Tout-Puissant nous fasse miséricorde, qu'il nous pardonne nos péchés et nous conduise à la vie éternelle.
Amen.
Prions-nous. Dieu, qui dans ton ineffable providence a choisi le bienheureux Basil, ton prêtre, pour favoriser l'imitation des vertus de la Sainte Famille et souvenir aux besoins de l'Église, accorde-nous, nous t'en supplions, que par ses prières et son exemple, nous proclamons la croix de Christ, notre unique espérance, lui qui règne avec toi et le Saint-Esprit, maintenant et pour les siècles des siècles. Amen.
Lecture de la lettre de Saint Paul aux Éphésiens. Frères, moi qui suis en prison à cause du Seigneur, je vous encourage à suivre fidèlement l'appel que vous avez reçu de Dieu. Ayez beaucoup d'humilité, de douceur et de patience. Supportez-vous les uns les autres avec amour. Il n'y a qu'un seul corps et un seul esprit. Il n'y a qu'un seul Seigneur, une seule foi, un seul baptême, un seul Dieu et Père de tous, qui règne au-dessus de tous, par tous et en tous. Chacun d'entre nous a reçu le don de la grâce comme le Christ nous l'a partagé. Et les dons qu'il a faits aux hommes, ce sont d'abord les apôtres, puis les prophètes et les missionnaires de l'Évangile, et aussi les pasteurs et ceux qui enseignent. De cette manière, le peuple saint est organisé pour que les tâches du ministère soient accomplies et que se construise le corps du Christ. Au terme, nous parviendrons tous ensemble à l'unité dans la foi et la vraie connaissance du Fils de Dieu, à l'état de l'homme parfait, à la plénitude de la stature du Christ.
Seigneur, tu es ma part d'héritage. Seigneur, Seigneur, tu es ma part d'héritage. Garde-moi, mon Dieu, je fais de toi mon refuge. J'ai dit au Seigneur, tu es mon Dieu. Seigneur, mon partage et ma coupe, de toi dépend mon sort. Seigneur, Seigneur, tu es ma part d'héritage.
Lord be with you. A reading from the Holy Gospel according to Matthew. Jesus told his followers, "If any want to become my disciples, let them deny themselves and take up their cross and follow me. For those who want to save their life will lose it, and those who want to lose their life for my sake will find it. For what will it profit them if they gain the whole world but forfeit their life? Or what will they give in return for their life? For the Son of Man is to come with his angels in the glory of his Father, and then he will repay everyone for what has been done." The Gospel of the Lord. Praise to you, Lord Jesus Christ.
Restez ici. Vos Excellences, Monseigneur Favre, mes chers frères évêques, chers frères prêtres et diacres, chers sœurs et frères dans la vie consacrée, spécialement vous, heureuses filles et fils de bienheureuse Basil. Messieurs les élus et représentants de la société civile, mes chers frères et sœurs en Jésus-Christ. The readings of today's Mass are well chosen. They describe for us three wonderful facets of the life of Blessed Basil: the man, the religious, the servant of the Lord. The epistle to the Ephesians is so clearly a call to unity. It is a plea made by the apostle for unity within the church and unity within every community of the faithful. St. Paul calls the Ephesians to recognize one Lord, one faith, one baptism, one God and Father of all, who is in all and works through all and is in all. This wondrous and often cited call of the apostle was very much the call of Basil Moreau throughout his life, as he strives to continue to hold together the religious families which he has established. He calls them to a unity with faith and understanding. He recognizes and enforces the gifts which God has given to the diverse members of the religious family which he has founded. But above all, he needs to hold them together. As best his resources can make possible, he trains and prepares them for their different roles. But it is always in complete conformity with the call of the apostle, a call to unity within the mystical body, and even more clearly, to unity within his vision of religious life. The gospel, of course, especially now as we read it in the light of the life and sufferings of Blessed Basil, becomes more fully alive for us in the story of his own passion. He suffered greatly toward the end of his life, not just physically, but in the sense that he found himself divorced from the religious family he loved so much. Perhaps he felt himself a failure. Perhaps he felt that all his dreams will ultimately come to naught. But surely he himself must have meditated on those words of Jesus after the first prophecy of the Passion. If anyone wishes to come after me, he must deny his very self, take up his cross, and begin to follow in my footsteps. Basil was doing this all the days of his life as he strove against the difficulties and the dangers of post-revolutionary France. And yet at the same time, it is in these darkest days that he becomes perhaps most perfectly attuned to the sufferings of Jesus and more totally consumed by the reality of the cross. It was no accident that the religious family which he founded would take its name from a neighborhood which was also the symbol of the supernatural reality which consumed him and which gave him strength even until the end. We give gratitude to God this day for blessing the process which found its culmination yesterday. But most of all, we give gratitude to God for giving us this man who is the center of our thoughts as a servant of Jesus and as a true pastor of the church. At every beatification, those who find themselves related in a special way to the newly beatified offer their thanksgiving to God as we do today. Thanksgiving to the church for giving us this process by which a truly holy man may be recognized by the faithful. Thanksgiving also to his congregations, which gave their loving support to this process, as if rediscovering his virtues, his accomplishments, and his role in their lives. I cannot help but think of the words of a former general of the congregation when the bodily remains of Blessed Basil were moved to the Church of Notre Dame de Sainte-Croix. He called out to his brothers and sisters in their religious family, and I quote him, you know the lines so well, "I want to declare before these sacred remains that we, his children, priests, brothers and sisters, recognize him as our worthy founder who has been humiliated and truly tried by unjustified treatment and has given fruitfulness to the congregation of Holy Cross, even through his tears and his sufferings." I am sure that Basil in heaven heard those words both with joy and sorrow, with joy at the recognition that his children had given him, and with sorrow that they had to pass for a time through a period of uncertainties which caused both him and them deep sorrow. But now that we can call on Blessed Basil and ask for his help as we look on the future, let us also become conscious of the things that he had taught us in the past. If one would want to make a list of his virtues, we'd have to begin with his love for the poor and for the uneducated. The wonderful story of the sacrifice which his family made for him to go to school and to study to be a priest is an unforgettable tribute to their deep faith and deep confidence in God. Basil left them with sorrow, not that he doubted that God was calling him, but that he truly knew that they would miss his two strong arms, his devoted service, and his generous love. Who can never forget the wonderful tale of his father walking him the 60 miles to the seminary, embracing him, kissing him farewell, and then turning to walk back home again. Basil knew the poor and loved the poor. The poor were his friends and his family. Even in his days of looking for financial help for the congregations, he reached out in a special way to the poor, asking for their help, knowing that so often the poor are more generous than anyone else because they have learned to do with less so that their neighbors may do with something. We may not forget as we recount his virtues, his deep fidelity to the church and in a special way to the Pope. He comes to maturity at a time when throughout France and much of Europe there is concern about whether one should be for the Pope or for their country. Basil knew no distinction. You serve your country best when you serve the church, when you serve God, when you serve the Pope. He had seen the church's suffering as a young child growing up in a time of turmoil, and he had understood that this vocation to which he was called was going to be one which required heroism and courage and perseverance. This perseverance is one of his great traits. He was always focused on the needs of the poor, focused on the needs to educate children, focused on the needs to call men and women into a life of holiness, focused on the need to establish institutions which could educate and care for those who had nothing else but God, and focused on the need to provide God's servants to look after them. Perhaps of all the virtues of this man, this is the most clear. He works day and night to help people. He reaches beyond France and beyond Europe to answer the call of the missions in the New World, to go to Africa, to go to America, to go to Asia. He never stops and never tires. Sometimes in his zeal he becomes difficult for others to work with, because he is totally committed to his task. Is he at times unwilling to recognize the weaknesses of others? Perhaps. But this is the fault of good people who see a moment wasted as a moment in which they could do so much more. He is an educator far ahead of his time. He has a vision of outstanding Catholic education, and this in a wonderful way he has passed on to his sons and daughters and to the institutions, the great institutions that they have built. One must also mention his honesty here. He had known the value of a penny and would never use one recklessly. This became both his triumph and his cross. His triumph in that he was a man in whom others could put total confidence because they knew he was as honest as the day is long. It was his cross, too, because sometimes those of his sons and daughters who felt they were more visionary than he, or more ready to dream, or more anxious to accomplish something quickly, were confronted by his careful, totally disciplined methodology, which would not even allow, or perhaps not even understand, what they felt so called to do. Ultimately, some accused him of not using funds properly, of not giving them what they needed to build the institutions he had asked them to build, of not joining their dream, their vision, in their way. Was he wrong in holding back so often? Perhaps he was. But isn't it possible that it was this extra caution that made some of the dreamers stay a little closer to reality and made them bring their plans to a stage where they would be a little more realistic and more firm? Maybe it was the combination of the brilliant vision of his children, made more reasonable by his own hesitation, that ultimately achieved the results they all had in mind and heart. But these virtues were strong as the man was strong. They were demanding as the man was demanding. And they had only one ultimate goal, that God be served in the best possible way, that men and women walk together as a family of faith, that they be truly united with the Pope and the Church and with each other, and that they never hesitate to be the best and to do the best they could. This was his dream. This was his vision. This was his hope. And in a way that perhaps during his lifetime he could not even imagine, this was the ultimate reality, which may not have been possible without his presence, his sacrifice, and indeed his pain. If we had visited him on his deathbed here in Le Mans, what would he have told us? Certainly not a word of anger, not a word of disappointment with the others who may not have been loyal. Perhaps a word of regret. Perhaps he thought that he had failed. Perhaps he thought in hindsight that it had all been in vain. But these were temptations of desolation, and his life was never given to those. We left him poor, depending on the Marianites of the Holy Cross to bring him food each day, in a poor house, taken care of by his sisters, suffering, pained, cut off from those he loved the most, his sons and daughters of his religious families. But does not that happen often in the lives of saints? Maybe this is the martyrdom of which we spoke earlier. This is certainly the cross where he becomes more and more configured to the agony of Christ in the garden. These make for the heroic virtues of Basil Moreau. But they are a cloud which passes, and which now is past, as we see in the light of his beatification the overwhelming joy of the Church and of his congregations, as we call him blessed. He calls to us and says to us, do not forget the old lessons. Be faithful to the Pope and faithful to the Church. Be faithful to the care of the poor. Be faithful to those deepest virtues of honesty and charity and perseverance. Be faithful to each other. And now we call him blessed. Blessed because the Lord has used him in so great a way, and because he had risen to that willingness to be used. May his message, which is so clear and so real to us in these days, continue to move our hearts and minds, and may we whose lives have been touched by his example, his teaching, and his suffering, never be afraid to see in him the other Christ that every religious must learn to be, that other shepherd who with Jesus will tend to the flock, that other dreamer whose dreams, because they are so deeply rooted in reality and in faith, we now see coming true in the works of his religious congregations and in the lives of his children. Bienheureuse Basil, notre Père, notre ami, notre guide, parle à nous de nouveau aujourd'hui. Nous te supplions, parle-nous par ton exemple, parle-nous par ta sagesse, parle-nous par ta fidélité à l'Église, parle-nous pour ton amour profond de Jésus et de sa croix, parle à nous par ton amour dévoué à la Vierge Marie, parle à nous qui sommes ta famille ici assemblée. Parle à l'Église, parle à la France. Faites que nous aussi puissions être ta voix, tes mains et ton cœur dans notre monde, en notre temps. Blessed Basil Moreau, father, educator, and friend of the poor, pray to the Lord for us. Amen. Croyez-vous en Dieu, le Père Tout-Puissant, Créateur du ciel et de la terre? Croyez-vous en Jésus-Christ, son Fils unique, notre Seigneur, qui est né de la Vierge Marie, a souffert la passion, a été enseveli, est ressuscité d'entre les morts, et qui est assis à la droite du Père?
Nous croyons.
Croyez-vous en l'Esprit Saint, en la Sainte Église catholique, à la communion des saintes, au pardon des péchés, à la résurrection de la chair et à la vie éternelle?
Nous croyons.
My dear sisters and brothers, with joy at the abundant blessing we have received, let us turn to our God in prayer. Let us trust that He will hear our petitions.
El Santo Papa Benedicto XVI, por todos los obispos y pastores de la Iglesia, que sus palabras y ejemplo den fuerza en fe a todos los que están encomendados a su cuidado.
Para os líderes das nações, para que trabalhem juntos, a fim de ajudar a construir um mundo em que a justiça e a paz floresçam em todos os países. Rezemos ao Senhor.
Pour famille Sainte-Croix qui gagne tout partout sur terre, pour les plus vaillants dans le travail d'évangélisation, dans l'esprit fondateur, bien-aimé Basil Moreau, en nous la vie.
বিশ্বব্যাপী যারা অসুস্থ, যন্ত্রণাকাতর ও দরিদ্রদের জন্য আমরা প্রার্থনা করি। খ্রিস্টের নামে যারা তাদের সেবা করছে, তাদের উদারতার মধ্যে তারা যেন আশা খুঁজে পায়। For this, we pray to the Lord.
Pour des vocations au sacerdoce et à la vie religieuse en Sainte-Croix, Que des jeunes s'engagent généreusement au service de l'Église à la suite du bienheureux Basil Moreau. Prions le Seigneur.
Prenez et mangez-en tous, ceci est mon corps, livré pour vous. De même, à la fin du repas, il prit la coupe. De nouveau, il rendit grâce, il la donna à ses disciples en disant, « Prenez et buvez-en tous, car ceci est la coupe de mon sang, le sang de l'alliance nouvelle et éternelle, qui sera versé pour vous et pour la multitude en rémission des péchés. Vous ferez cela en mémoire de moi. » Les invite à prier en votre propre langue. I ask all of us as we come to the Our Father to pray in our own language. Notre Père, hallowed be thy name. Thy kingdom come. Thy will be done on earth as it is in heaven. Give us this day our daily bread. Forgive us our trespasses, as we forgive those who trespass against us. Not into temptation, but deliver us from evil. Deliver us, Lord, from every evil and grant us peace in our day. In your mercy, keep us free from sin and protect us from all anxiety as we wait in joyful hope for the coming of our Savior, Jesus Christ.
For the kingdom, the power, and the glory are yours, now and forever.
Seigneur Jésus-Christ, tu as dit à tes apôtres, je vous laisse la paix, je vous donne ma paix. Ne regardez pas nos péchés, mais la foi de ton Église. Pour que ta volonté s'accomplisse, donne-lui toujours cette paix et conduise-la vers l'unité parfaite, tout qui règne pour les siècles des siècles.
Amen.
Que la paix du Seigneur soit toujours avec vous.
Et avec votre esprit.
May the peace of Christ be always with you.
Let us offer to one another a sign of Christ's peace.
Peace, God bless you. Chers frères, toujours avec non, merci à vous. Merci, mon père. C'est une grande joie de vous avoir ici pour moi. La paix de Christ. La paix de Christ, chers frères. God bless you. That's great.
burning within us. In the name of all of the Holy Cross family and friends of Holy Cross, it is my privilege to offer a few words of thanks for making this historic moment a reality. The profound joy and holy pride that has filled all of us these past 3 days owes gratitude to many individuals. Neither time nor daring allows me to mention each individual who has made significant contributions to this holy celebration. At the same time, I believe that a select few need to be mentioned by name. The Mayor of Le Mans, Monsieur Boulard, we owe you a deep gratitude for the plaque in the Linné in Berlin at the church. We are grateful to you for providing for us to use the Antares Center for the Beatification yesterday. And we are grateful to you for naming a street in Le Mans after Blessed Basil Moreau. Cardinal McCarrick, you have been a friend to Holy Cross through many years, and your presiding this liturgy of Thanksgiving is a very special joy and honor for us. Thank you. We also to express our enduring gratitude to our lay colleagues and friends, many of whom are here today, who help us to carry Moreau's vision and charism throughout the world on a daily basis. Your presence and participation in this beatification has multiplied our joy. Finally and foremost, our humble and profound gratitude is expressed to our founder, Basil Anthony Mary Moreau. The example of your trust into the providence of God, your vision and courage to respond to the needs of your time, your faith in the midst of difficulties, your largeness and generosity of heart to send your members far from France are but a few of the gifts for which we, your family of Holy Cross, and your friends bow in gratitude. We are blessed by your life, strengthened by your example, and today we renew our conviction, along with you, that Holy Cross is not a human work, but God's very own. Thank you.
I hear Basil saying to us, one thing more, pray for each other. Pray for each other. All in the community, all in the congregations, all those, pray for me too. Pray for all of us together. He's saying that, and I hear him saying that, so I want to repeat that to all of you. I would like to invite my brother bishops to join me in the blessing, with your permission. Le Seigneur est avec vous. Béni soit le nom du Seigneur. Notre secours est dans le nom du Seigneur. Que le Dieu Tout-Puissant vous bénisse, Père, et le Fils, et le Saint-Esprit. Amen.